tell us a little bit kind of initially about how you ended up getting involved in, going over to Amsterdam and getting involved with the product there?
Yeah, sure. So, by my plummy accent, you can tell I'm a Brit. I'm from Brighton originally, down on the south coast. I worked at a company called bunq, which is a SaaS business based down in Brighton, founded by a really amazing entrepreneur called Giles Palmer. And I was there for 7 years, and it was a really interesting journey. And Giles was actually the person that pushed me into sort of ecosystem development and product management. The chief design officer down there, Katia, is also someone who really influenced me from a design perspective. How we need to think about the value of design, the process by which we discover and validate not just problems but ultimately solutions. I think it was about this time last year, I said to my other half, she's Flemish speaking, Belgian. Amsterdam's tech scene is incredibly interesting, so we started to have a look. It was halfway between home for both of us. She's from Ghent originally. Right. And bunq leapt out at me. Brighton's quite a punky town. I think bunq in general is a pretty challenging brand. It's trying to shake things up. And the specific thing that really piqued my interest about bunq was there's a feature called freedom of choice, where any user is basically from within the app able to specify whether they want to get interest, because obviously your money is making money. But then to specify in which funds you would want it to be invested in. And that kind of radical transparency really appealed to me. And so I started talking to the guys, and I think I formally started in the beginning of November. It's been really, really interesting.
So do I get the impression then that you were a designer by trade before then, or were you sort of, what angle did you kind of come into product from, if you don't mind me asking?
Really interesting question. So at bunq, I was actually on the enterprise team. So bunq's technology was essentially to basically index the social web and then provide a bunch of tools that enable brands to understand what the hell people are saying about them. What do they think and feel about our products, our services? And from there, Giles pushed me to say, okay, well, you've got a plan for where you think this can go. You need to start getting closer to the production environment so that you can start to actually design the products to deliver this value to both our customers, our partners, and to our business. And so I'm much more at the commercial end of product management. And as I say, I work very closely with Katia, who's the chief design officer down there. I mean, design fascinates me. I think it's an incredible discipline. I think, only now is it starting to really get the kind of props that it deserves, because, in today's world, consumers are taught that they should expect the very best experiences. They should be convenient, they should be simple, they should be transparent. And it really is as simple as that. So that was my entrance into the world of product.
Sort of, what does a product team look like at bunq? So you mentioned that you've got this really comprehensively sort of great set of like back end and like sort of product building people.
Within the product team, there are 3 product teams, and there is a new 4th one, which is the product design department, which has moved into product fairly recently, and we're investing very heavily in that. So the 3 product teams are all focused on slightly different areas of interest for both the business and our users. So the core team, which is called Captivation, is responsible for the existing propositions that are in the market. So that's the 3 personal banking propositions, the travel card, the premium subscription, and then SuperGreen. And then we also have symmetrically the same propositions on the business side. So again, we have a business travel card, a standard business subscription, and then business SuperGreen. So when we launched the V3 app, we moved into a super short sort of iteration cycle. So the backend and the apps teams were working on basically releasing every day. So the cadence, once we shipped the product, we really started to accelerate the rate at which we were delivering. We had a ton of user feedback for both small incremental things that we anticipated from the feedback that we got in the beta, and a ton of feedback that we got from our users. And so the teams worked in these super short bursts to iterate the product as quickly as possible to try and develop it, because we wanted to get to market as quickly as possible. One of the central drivers behind the version of the new app was to make the onboarding experience as fast and as seamless as possible. On that basis, we wanted to try and open up the headroom to get to market as quickly as possible, which, you know, the numbers have borne that out. So that was great.
Yeah.
But then, of course, we've got an existing base of users as well. So we really had to push incredibly hard to make sure that we got them to an experience that they expect from us and we're used to.
So can you talk a little bit about what SuperGreen is, like the holistic approach to the problem that you were trying to solve, and kind of why you moved from this kind of green card element over towards the SuperGreen approach?
Yeah, so we launched the green card at the end of last year. Mm-hmm. And the launch was tremendously successful, but it was effectively a card that you could purchase on an annual subscription. The problem on bunq side at the time is that we had multiple legacy subscriptions, we had multiple card propositions, and it became increasingly complex to explain to people which proposition made sense to them depending on what mattered to them. The SuperGreen account is the top end subscription. So what that does is it takes all of the value from the existing premium subscription, and with this environmental twist on the top that says for any card purchases across your subscription, for every 100 euros we'll plant a tree. Mm-hmm. So the central thesis is essentially that, you know, increasingly people expect that the choices that they make, and, you know, the demonstrable ones and profound ones are those that they choose to make with their own money, ultimately add up to making a difference. And on that basis, banks have a central part to play in helping the world to become a better place, because it's a central component to the entire system of how the world works, right? Yeah. So we don't want people to spend more. We don't want to drive consumerism. What we want is to offer people that want to make an impact on the environment and want their choices to have an impact on the environment a super simple way of being able to basically vote with their spend. Yeah. So the way that the subscription works is that obviously we're constantly counting in the background for, you know, multiples of 100. As soon as you reach that on your spend, we'll then plant a tree. Yeah. I think we'll see later on that there is a graphical representation of the forest, and then we start to tell you, here is the impact that your spend is starting to make. So it's really designed to make it super easy and super simple for people to vote with their money. Yeah. They don't actually have to change anything about their existing habits to do so.
Okay. So there's like a habit. There is you actively saying you don't need to change your habits, but there is a corporate social responsibility which you're embracing on your side, which is saying we want to do this thing because we think that it will have a positive impact on the user. Like, is there any kind of component of the user's kind of like own impact being kind of a gratifying experience or anything like that?
Yeah. So we hear a lot from users that they want to understand what kind of impact they're making. Mm-hmm. So what we do is we show them, this is the total number of trees that you've planted. Yeah. And then we tell them, okay, this is the amount of time that it's going to take you by spending and collecting trees to become CO2 neutral over time, right? So yes, we want to help you to understand, you know, how you're bettering the world by effectively normalizing your spend, by planting trees on your behalf. So we run a very simple calculation to be able to do that. So we take the average amount of CO2 that a European is responsible for generating. Right. We take the average amount of CO2 that's consumed by the trees that our partner, the Eden Rainforest Project, plants over a 25-year period. Mm-hmm. We take the number of trees that you collect each month, and we run a simple calculation to say that, you know, given your current spending pattern, you plant X number of trees, which will take you X number of months to reach that goal.
On the partnership with the Eden, was it the Eden Project they're called? So they are a for those, I guess, that don't know, they are directly involved with boots on the ground sort of planting activities. Is that correct? Yeah. And that's is it in Madagascar or?
Yes, they have multiple sites all over the place, but we are planting in Madagascar.
Did you kind of find the process of working with these guys really easy? How did you kind of work on the premise of, like, I guess, understanding the unit economics of planting a tree and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, really good question. So you have to do your due diligence, right? If you want to undertake something like this, because, well, one, it's meaningful and important. And two, we not only but our users will want to hold us to account for it. Mm-hmm. So one of the POs here was responsible for identifying partners. We ran a bunch of research against that to understand who was out there that we could potentially work with.
Yeah.
To figure out, what the costs of this stuff are, figure out people's creds. Are these trees real? Where are they? And to also understand, what kind of scale were people doing this at? One of the great things about the Eden guys is that they have multiple partners already out there that have planted millions of trees with them. So obviously we need to know that over time that we've got a partner that can handle the kind of scale that we hope and expect to be able to push towards them, to be able to make a really significant impact. Yeah. I think a couple of months ago, we committed to hitting 1 million trees to be downloaded by February of next year. There are a number of partners with the Eden project that have already done so. So that provides us with the confidence that they're the right guys to go with.
Sure. And this sort of, so the payments to this particular charity, does that happen on a kind of like a month? Would you like batch together payments on a monthly basis and then send out, or how does that kind of work from your end? I'm sorry, this is very nitty gritty, but
that's fine. Yeah. So obviously we're collecting the spend in real time.
Yeah.
And we're updating users with their progress.
Yeah.
And then on a monthly basis, I sign the invoices for, I think, the last time, the numbers are increasingly scaling, so the trees are becoming increasingly expensive, which it's a nice problem to have, right?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because on the one hand, the charity thing means so much to so many people, but on the other hand, like the system of providing payments to charities is just so not only difficult and arduous, but even in the UK, something like gift aid is such a monumentally difficult thing to navigate, and a really interesting sort of technical problem to try and solve. I think that there's so much room within that space, and definitely so much room for you guys to have a play around with that. Shall we take a look at the SuperGreen sort of like sign up process? Right. So bunq, here we go. We're gonna log in. Feel free to jump in, of course, if I've misrepresented anything. But we have a kind of run through of all of the key kind of offerings within the product.
Yeah.
And we saw just very briefly there the mention of our sort of tree impact. And then we can see, like, I guess, right top and center there, we have our tree symbol and a bit of information there about the premium SuperGreen account, which we've just mentioned in some detail with terms and conditions. So it seems as though a nice little pop-up there, but we've made the trees a core part of the normal offering. Is that a fair assessment to make? Is this kind of someone's experience of the normal bunq product without actually having applied for the SuperGreen product?
Yeah, so the core experience, regardless of proposition, remains the same. There are effectively two ways to be able to plant trees with bunq. The first is obviously the SuperGreen subscription, spend €100, plant a tree.
Right.
But over time, we also want to reward people for the kinds of social behaviors that drive their friends and family to also get the benefits from bunq.
Right.
So we're starting to introduce a whole bunch of other mechanics for our users to be able to realize the benefits of doing that, even without a SuperGreen subscription. Right. Because we think, as we were talking about earlier, that people want to be able to have an impact. And you shouldn't just necessarily have to pay for it on an ongoing basis if you want it for your spend. So we want it to be more inclusive. We want to make it easier for people to understand how they can be rewarded as well.
Did you have any particular sort of persona that you were addressing or anything like that?
Yeah, so we have a persona that we work towards with a clear bunch of attributes. But I think regardless of whether you want a premium subscription, whether you want a business subscription, or whether you want SuperGreen, the reality is that all of those user types expect a simple, clear, short, precise way to get their hands on the product. So the sort of the user experience that we saw there is common across all user types. And it's really the philosophy of the new version of the app to make the entry point into the experience super simple. So what we wanted to do was remove okay, I've got to do 25 onboarding steps, and I've got to find my passport, and I've got to do the identity verification, just to be able to be told that I can explore whether this thing is something that is useful or interesting or valuable to me.
Okay, so you sort of I guess, triaging the different sort of levels of requirements based on what happens. So I guess there would be an application process later on down the line should you say, actually, I'd like to become a business premium customer.
Yeah, exactly. So based on the spending limits that are available to you as a user for a e-money versus full banking product, we layer up the experience so that we make it super simple for you to get in, understand what bunq is about, top it up very quickly so that you can start to spend and see if it's useful and valuable. See if it's directly aligned with the values that you care about, and explore a bunch of the features within the application itself. So that, once you're clear, this is the product for me, then the user can invest their time, effort, and energy in actually going through the verification process. So we wanted to lead with the product first,
that makes sense,
before gating it for everybody else.
It's really interesting. And I guess that sort of in a way solves your sort of European problem as well. Like if different countries have different onboarding regulations and that kind of thing, then presumably something like this would allow you to build stickiness into the product sooner rather than later, and then allow the complicated regulatory stuff to be done at a later date or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's directly aligned with the user's choice. It's a bit like if you were to go to Foot Locker, they say, okay, well, I just need you to fill out this identity verification form that's 25 pages long before we'll let you in the shop, before you can even browse and understand whether there is something here that's of value to you. It doesn't make any sense, right? So just because it's a banking product, it doesn't, and clearly there are regulations that we have to adhere to and respect and all of that kind of good stuff. It doesn't mean that we can't offer people a taste of the experience before we then ask them to complete all of the necessary paperwork.
And the way that that's sort of delivered is you have this really nice and beautifully designed sort of widget that sits at the bottom of the page, and then you expand that, and you've managed to hide a comprehensive range of different business and personal products within a neat little area. Whilst I guess before there was a bottom nav item with, do this, that kind of.
So in the old version of the app, we would force the user at the beginning of the flow to say, okay, are you here for a personal or business banking account? And then depending on whether they chose those two, then we would go through the different verification routes for those various regulatory steps that we need to take. Then we would say, okay, which of these personal products, if you chose that, do you want? Where are you? And then you go through that process. But then one of the other central things behind the unification of the personal and business banking in this third version of the app is that we're also seeing not just people that are more conscious about the choices that they make from a sustainability point of view, but the nature between their work and life is also changing, right? So there are increasingly users that start with a personal subscription that then want to either create their own little freelancing gig, set up their own little company. And they want one place where they can quickly and easily manage both of those things. And obviously, if they liked the bunq experience from a personal banking point of view, then of course they'll like it for all of the automation features from a business point of view. And what we don't want to do is segregate the two. Both of those things are intrinsically linked, right?
Yeah.
And similarly, on the business side, we have a number of features that make it really easy for business owners to be able to share access to certain accounts to their employees. And those employees are then able to use the business account for their expenses or, their general corporate spend.
Yeah.
And then those guys then say, okay, this is a really interesting business banking product. I'd like to be able to use that for my own personal banking. And it's very easy for them to be able to set themselves up and get up and running from that side of things as well.
That's really interesting because it sort of like assumes that there's going to be a changing relationship between your user and the product that they're using at the beginning of the time with you. Like in the sense of, I guess one thing that product teams tend to be very focused on is the here and now, and sort of like, what is the user doing right now that I can leverage, which is going to make me build that stickiness that I need to get them using it on a regular basis. But this seems like an approach to say, we appreciate and understand that your relationship with us is going to change over the course of the lifetime of your usage of this product. Here is the diversified range of offerings we can offer, and the way that they're presented is really interesting.
Yeah, exactly. So it might be that, from a personal banking point of view, you want to go travel. Okay, fine. We have an entry-level product that will deliver value to you. Use it. And then, if you want to be able to manage group expenses, we have a free feature that enables you to do that. And then we start to prove to people that we can help them to manage their money more effectively and deliver value to them. And so they might want to do that for all of their spend. And then it might be that over time that they then see that we represent their values as effectively as possible. So the contributions that they want to make to causes that they care about, the fact that we're incredibly transparent about where their money goes, the fact that we don't do anything with their data, and the fact that, over time we can help them to make an impact on the environment. But of course it stands to reason that if the nature between personal life and working life is changing, and people want to be able to control that more and set up their own little business, then we should also enable that cross-sell, not just the upsell as well. Right. And we see this kind of change happening, on a much bigger scale across Europe as a societal change. So it's sort of akin to the kind of change that there is in people thinking about the ethical choices that they want to make in their personal life. Yeah. They also want to balance their work-life roles as well. So this is another way that unlocks that kind of new type of behavior that we're seeing.
Sure, cool. And on that note, we've got this ability to plant a tree, and we'll take a look at the way that kind of happens now. Right, so we've planted one tree, we can see up there, and then we're going to see the process of another tree being added to our, what we'll call forest, or I think that's what you guys call it.
Yeah.
A kind of canopy or what have you that you can see within the product. So we've made a payment here.
That's the Albert Heijn, which is basically the Tesco's over here.
The big old Tesco's.
Yeah. If you imagine someone's been waiting in the queue, they've gone through the checkout, they've tapped their card on the reader, and they've planted another tree. They can look through into spend. So that's what you see here.
Yeah, you can see.
And then if they drop back into the main section, this is where the tree itself will be planted.
That's the previous tree, and then when it goes back into it, there is a new sort of notification which will pop up, which shows you the second tree has appeared. And obviously this is not happening sort of like, this is a gradual process. So there's a payment currently happening, and there needs to be verification happening and that kind of thing. We've seen there, we've got the second tree added, and we have a larger tree than we previously did. The tree has grown. The takeaways from that is there is a very visual realization of what you're achieving by spending a certain amount of money. You see a visual representation of growth happening in front of you in the form of this canopy or this sort of treescape thing. What's kind of happening from the background there? I think we touched on this before, but there's a transaction made, and then essentially you'll be logging or updating that transaction, and then saying that transaction equals one tree, and then adding it to the user's account in that sort of
exactly. So there's a couple of other additional things that are going on. One is that obviously where we might see this later, I think, in relation to the tribes, where we also show the total number of trees that are planted by all of our users.
Yes.
So that obviously is then updated.
Mm.
And then obviously we're keeping a record because we owe the Eden project some money for each and every tree that we're planting.
Yeah, yeah. And that's where it gets interesting as well, because it's sort of like your own individual impact is very, very unique and specific to you, but oftentimes it's only when it's seen kind of collectively that it becomes a kind of like, wow, this is a massive kind of thing that's being done here, especially with your goal of like 1 million trees as well. It's kind of nice to work towards that end goal. Big thing here is the push notification side of things as well. Like there is a big, like what we saw from there was the users being gratified essentially, or kind of, well, in a way delighted by the fact that they're able to kind of receive a notification saying, you did a great thing here, sort of a reinforcing sort of message to happen. Great work, your forest is growing. So you're kind of using the tools that surround the app, not just the app itself, in order to create this good feeling and good energy. Did you have any notion that like that was going to be a big thing part of it, like the actual the notifications part of it, or how did you want to convey or talk about impact?
Yeah, I think it's really important, right? Because the whole concept is fairly abstract. You know, where's the CO2 that you're talking about? So, you know, trees are very tangible, but obviously you can't see the one you've just planted. So what we want to do, obviously, is give something for people to anchor on, so they can obviously see their progress and the impact that they're making.
Sure.
But as you point out, that can't just be passive in the app, because what we want to do is reinforce this really healthy behavior for this choice that the user is making. To say, you know, it still catches me out every now and again when I'm, you know, when I've spent something and I get the notification to tell me, oh, you know, I've spent 150 euros or whatever it is at Albert Heijn, and then the follow-up notification, oh, you know, you've planted another tree, and it's really delightful.
Sure.
But also, people are still suspicious of banks, right? And I think this experience within bunq, and you know how it's designed, the kind of quirkiness, the charm, whatever you want to describe it as, is very different to people's expectations of how banks behave and design products.
Sure.
There's no reason why they can't be transparent, good fun, you know, and have a sense of humor and also make an impact.
Sure.
So our users are hopefully carrying that message to their friends and family as well.
Their friends and family, and then introducing them to their tribes. So let's take a look at that. So like, as we were touching on there a little bit before, there is a shared element or a shared experience here, which can be really useful for you guys in order to show and convey the impact of, you know, reaching that 1 million tree mark or what have you. But then there is also a sharing element, a kind of bringing your friends into the club, if you will, the virtue club, we might want to call it. It is a tribe where we can see our collective activity. We can pick a name for it, socialize it, kind of, and then here invite friends. And then off the back of that, there is a collective kind of experience, and more people means more trees, which is obviously very good for this particular chart that we're being shown here. So inviting friends can happen within this area. You can see your own particular contribution, and then where that tribe ranks, that kind of competition or gamification elements that I've played with in the product. It's a compelling proposition, like the notion of starting off with your own sort of personal contribution, but then moving into the world of combined contributions is really compelling, I think. What was the kind of the main thinking here then in terms of the network effect side of things? Is that the main driver here, or was it was it slightly more virtuous than my own?
Well, you know, at the end of the day, we are product people, right? So, and you know, fairly similar to what we were talking about earlier in relation to users sharing their progress with their friends and family.
Yeah.
We wanted to make that as easy as possible for them and make it fun and make it interesting. And you know, it's a very simple mechanic at the moment, right? So the reality is that people are essentially inviting either their friends that are existing bunq users or SuperGreen members to join them in their tribe as they're spending, or to become members of bunq over time. So there is an organic element to the proposition that's incredibly useful and compelling for us, obviously.
Absolutely. That's really cool.
But we wanted to start with just creating a community component to it. So there's obviously two mechanics here, right? One is that we are doing this together in our little tribe. It's not just me and my spend, but together we can share our forest, and you'll get an aggregation of that in your own version of the forest.
Sure.
And then the other is, of course, that people like to compete. So there are I think a bunch of really interesting things that we can do going forwards to continue to incentivize this really interesting, healthy behavior.
Yeah.
And over the course of certainly the rest of this year, you'll see a bunch of new interesting things that we'll be doing to continue to drive that forward.
Very cool. And one of the interesting things there about this is, like, I guess with something like with this particular charity, you can be very kind of clear and concise as to what sort of what the unit economic of a tree is and that kind of thing, which makes it very kind of useful from a visual kind of design language perspective. But you're also offering things like offsetting of flights, and that, I guess, is a component of like offsetting your CO2 footprint in a way, just presented in really meaningfully kind of concise and compact ways. Like, we want to calculate things like offsetting a flight. Surely there must be some work that goes on in there from like maybe an impact reporting, sort of like checking out those documents that the charities provide, and all those kind of really interesting sort of like product tasks that you wouldn't usually expect to be doing in a role, but then end up kind of doing anyway.
Yeah. So there is a whole bunch of this kind of stuff, right? So I mentioned the freedom of choice feature, which is the user's ability to tell us where they want us to hold their funds. So obviously there's a whole bunch of reporting that needs to go on there, that we hold ourselves to account, and we publish all of this kind of stuff on the website.
Yeah.
So it's not new to the team here.
Sure.
But the central component to all of this is it has to feel tangible and meaningful, because otherwise, some number of CO2 is just intangible to people. So we want people to understand, how they can make progress, not just the physical trees themselves, but quantifying, okay, what does 50 trees mean in reality? What kind of impact am I making as a consequence of that? Flights, again, is a fairly visceral thing, I think, because, everybody obviously wants to travel. And that is a really core component of the lifestyle choices of our users, and so it's a very tangible thing that people understand.
There's like an inherent conflict in there, isn't there? Because on the one hand, they know that flights are really morally odious when it comes to this climate side of things, but then there's a sort of like the corollary to that, which is that I don't want to be like, it's great for Greta Thunberg to be on a boat in the middle of the Atlantic, sailing over to the United States for a tour, but I have a regular life, and I can't sail over on the sea. I have to take a plane. So it's quite difficult, and there's really interesting sort of like emotional relationships with these types of things. But
it comes back to the balance that we were talking about earlier, right? It shouldn't feel punitive. People still, I fly, you fly, everyone does, right? But the reality is that the SuperGreen subscription is just a very simple way of saying, well, okay, well, if I paid for this flight, if it was 600 quid, okay, I planted 6 trees, and over the course of its lifetime, it's going to balance out. So there are these small, meaningful things that people can do, that can make an impact, and that's the notion between the whole proposition, right? It's just a simple thing that fits into your standard behavior, not asking you to do anything that you don't already do. Super simple and easy.
Cool. And then the final kind of journey that we're going to take a look at here is the consolidation of those of this experience within the kind of format of the card. So as we were saying before, I guess we're going to round off by saying that this has become a consolidated part of the premium offering, and you have like this metal card type sort of view here, and we can create a new one. You see our sort of visualization of it there, and a really nice sort of like delightful set of confetti drops down, and you can see then very quickly what's happening with it from a postage perspective, followed by the ability to kind of add that card to Apple Pay as well. So that's kind of like the round off of this amazing sort of proposition sort of being built within bunq at the minute to help with the climate change. But then there is still just a metal card. Like, this is a normal part of life. This shouldn't be an extra sort of thing of its own character and spirit. You know, this should become like a part of your regular day-to-day habits. And that's what it means to me. Maybe that's a completely kind of frothy reading of it, but that's what I would take from that anyway, in a way.
Well, there are a couple of elements here, right? So, you know, bunq aspires to provide a premium experience, so regardless of whether you pay us a subscription or not. So the metal card is the sort of glossy, you know, premium card proposition that we offer.
Yes.
So there is a sense of we want our users to, you know, sort of somewhat revel in what's a quality product. Mm-hmm. The other is that there is a sustainability angle here as well. So, you know, the lifetime of the card is at least 50% longer than the standard plastic card. The expiry date, I believe, is at least 50% longer than the plastic cards as well. Mm-hmm. So it's not just, you know, a beautiful, pretty, glossy thing that is a quality product. There is also a sustainability angle here. And I think that's cool. It's going to be interesting to see where we go with card propositions in general, right? Because increasingly there are other interesting, sustainable options that we can explore from a card point of view and offer to our customers over time. So yeah. I think there are some innovative, interesting things to do there as well.
No, for sure. And I guess one of the things that we know, and you can see like a version of this playing out at the minute with what's going on with like Revolut and sort of Monzo's sort of spats over there, like Monzo's new card design and things. This is very like niche UK fintech, the doldrums of Twitter sort of being raked here. But you know, like there is a very emotional attachment or relationship that people have with like the card itself. You know, like for example, Monzo have got this new Plus product thing, which is absolutely not hot coral, and there is outrage. And then bunq's, for example, is a very kind of very vibrant and expressive original color scheme, and card was kind of reflected in that. But you've moved to something more premium and sort of and maybe reserved might be the best way to describe that. But was there any hesitation there in moving away from the vibrancy and the kind of maybe this is a question more for a designer or what have you, but this is, you know, there is an emotional relationship with the card that you might not get, you know?
Yeah, so the metal card isn't the only card that we offer. The existing travel card, which has obviously the rainbow color scheme on it, that has like a really nice, glossy, glittery kind of sheen to it. Yeah. And then there are the standard Maestro and MasterCard debit cards that we also offer, which have the same color scheme, but they're a slightly matter, matte sheen to the matter. So those still exist. It's just that we're rounding out the offering, right, for each of our users. So the metal card is for the SuperGreen users that subscribe and can get access to the metal card, because it is our top end subscription. Yeah. As I say, I think there is the rainbow isn't going anywhere. You know, I think it's a part of bunq's identity. It's very well known for it. I mean, we've seen other people do stuff around it. And that kind of quirkiness is here to stay, and that kind of sense of humor, I think, is here to stay as well.
Yeah, cool. And just a final question on this note, but this is kind of around that card issuance point. Obviously, there are a lot of people I guess mainly within the industry, but maybe users that are affected by this as well, who've been sort of like maybe a little bit burnt by the Wirecard experience. Card issuance is provided by Wirecard amongst many a range of other players. If it's not too much to ask, I wondered what's bunq's approach to kind of card issuance? Do you have any providers specifically that you'd work with? How have you found the approach of kind of like issuing cards and things like that? Any interruptions or things of that nature?
Yeah, no, so we don't work with those guys.
We don't work with those guys.
I mean, it's an extraordinary story, right? You know, I saw that Curve in the UK were affected and turned around their card supply and production incredibly quickly, which...
Yeah, I believe you went to checkout.com, which is that kind of big grower in the UK at the minute. For doing their card issuance. But there's other providers out there like Galileo have like an instant product, which is really great. And we're seeing kind of like, I guess people maybe starting to bring this functionality, like the card issuance relationships in-house directly, working directly with like your Maestros or your Visas and MasterCards and that kind of thing. Or just, and then using these sort of smaller providers like Galileo to just get them off the ground, you know, get them maybe their first couple of thousand customers or something like that. So it's obviously a very touchy subject. So
yeah, no doubt. And it, you know, managing managing card supply chain is a tricky business. Forecasting demand, trying to drive up user counts so you can get better unit economics over time. Being able to control not just the unboxing experience for users, but to be able to I think we saw it earlier in terms of managing users' expectations around when this thing should be turning up. Being able to do that across multiple European markets is obviously tricky. But it's a core component of the overall experience because the reality is that they don't think that it's PostNL or whoever else it is that is delivering the cards in whichever European market. You know, they think it's us. And so it's incumbent on us to be able to deliver the most effective, efficient, delightful experience possible.
Sure. Cool. All right, and one final question, just to run over, but long-term sort of aims for the charitable side of this product specifically, we have obviously you've made great strides in the past few months on building this new area, and you probably don't want to think too much about what's next right now, but what would a great kind of SuperGreen sort of product look like for you in 6 months' time?
I would like to get to a point where we can help users to make more actionable decisions based on the impact of their spend against certain merchants, against certain categories of spend, certain products. So we can help them not just to spend money with whoever and plant trees, but be able to optimize that spend over time and say, okay. So I think there's a lot of interesting things that we can do there that will enable a user to understand the impact of spending with an Albert Heijn, for example, and saying, you know, if you were to use this merchant, not that merchant, even if your spend was exactly the same, this could be the increase in the impact on your spending from a sustainability point of view. To be able to give users that kind of insight, I think would be really compelling. That's the aim. That's a tricky thing to accomplish, but you know, that's what bunq's all about.
That's great. Well, I look forward to seeing what happens with it. Thanks so much for making the time to have a chat.
Pleasure. Thank you for your time.
If you want to hear a little bit more about Pulse, the platform that underlies this show, then head over to pulse.11fs.com. That's essentially a repository of all the different digital banking experiences we've been gathering over the years. It'll show you how stuff's being built, what all the cool things are out there, and what your competitors are doing.